So, Castlevania was a show I hadn't watched for the longest time simply because at first I didn't see anything that intrigued me. I had never played any of the video games, so it just seemed pointless to watch. Then Blue from OSP messaged me and convinced me to watch the show, but he also awoke a fire in me by showing me a non-spoiler still from the show in Season 3. He told me he knew I'd hate the thing he showed me, but promised the show was fantastic otherwise. So I watched it, and yeah, it's a really well done show. As I was watching it, I thought about doing a video talking about the show's historical accuracies or lack thereof. At first it seemed silly for a fantasy show about Dracula and vampires leading armies, but remember, it's set out in 15th century Europe. The great majority of the places in the show are real historical cities and towns of the time. Plus, the character Dracula has always been based off of the historical figure Vlad Dracul III Tepesh. Tepesh, by the way, means impaler. It's not his actual last name like it strangely is in the show. That aside, there are some neat details based on the fact that he is based off of Vlad III. But ultimately, as the show continued, I didn't feel like it had enough material for such a video. But then there was that one still from the show that Blue sent me. I just couldn't ignore how horrible it was compared to the wonderful quality of the rest of the show. Honestly, you've seen the title, so you should know what it is by now. It was a map of the show's setting, and it had so many things wrong with it, I don't even know where to begin. But for this video, I'll explain why this map was wrong and what a correct map would look like. But first, I need to take a bit of time to talk about this week's sponsor, Ridge Wallet. With Ridge Wallet, you can abandon the old-fashioned flimsy leather wallet that always dealt with too much bulk or water damage for a sleek metal wallet that can hold up to 12 cards and fit slimly in your pocket. With over 40 designs, you can find a Ridge wallet just for you. I had a Ridge wallet I'd been using for years, but this time they offered me a new one with a different design to test out, with a little cash strap instead of a clip, and honestly, I didn't even think these could get any better, but they did. And if you want your own cool wallet for yourself, you can go to the link in the description and use the code EMPEROR for 10% off your own Ridge wallet. Or perhaps with Father's Day coming up, it could be a gift for your dad. Get Ridge today, and thanks to Ridge for sponsoring this video. So instead of using the still of the map that Blue sent me, I'm going to pull up the full version of the map in question. So what's wrong with the map? It looks pretty cool, and yes, it does. I always admire older fashioned looking maps. It's just that the information it displays is inaccurate. Despite the show being set in the late 1470s, most of these borders are just sloppily drawn modern borders. This causes a few problems, such as here, where it shows a unified Romania, when in reality it was divided into 3 parts at the time. In the northwest we have what is called Transylvania, but during this time it was still a part of Hungary, believe it or not. And then the northeast was a separate country called Moldavia, and it also included modern-day Moldova as well. Then the southern area, which is the show's main setting, is Wallachia, also a separate country. To me, this seems like the most bizarre mistake of the map because you'd think the map would at least show the show's main setting correctly. And you can see Moldavia and Wallachia labeled on here. But it's still bordered and colored like it's one country when the concept of a unified Romania wouldn't happen for another several centuries. Then you also have Bosnia existing, which at this time wasn't a country, but an Ottoman province, or Sanjak. But also the area labeled as Bosnia is in modern-day Slovenia, and that didn't exist at all in this time. Also, where's Istria? Did it just, sink into the Adriatic? And why is Belgrade all the way up here? And how come there are several rivers depicted, but not the Danube River, the main river of the show and one of the largest in Europe? Why does Poland control all of Germany for some reason? Now, does this somehow ruin the show? Of course not, it's a great show. Does this map being bad really matter in the grand scheme of things? No, but as a channel obsessed with maps, I feel like it would be a missed opportunity to not show you what this map would really look like if it was historically accurate, as well as adding a few details solely belonging to the show. Here's an outline of the coasts and rivers, including the Danube River, because that one's important. Now let's start placing down countries. Austria is a weird one because at this time it was more of a collection of multiple duchies, grand duchies, and so on. And during the 1470s it was actually kind of ruled by 2 rulers and different halves of it, if you will, but it wouldn't be inaccurate to show it as a single color in this case. But in addition, Austria was differently shaped than it is now, and it included modern-day Slovenia as well as other areas. However, during the time of the show this map is used, it says that Styria, which is a duchy normally controlled by the Austrian rulers, is under control of Carmilla the Vampire and her forces. So, to keep it accurate to the show, I've given Styria its own borders and color. Next, I'm adding the Holy Roman Empire, which is always tricky. The Holy Roman Empire was legally in charge of modern-day Germany, Czechia, and Austria, but it was fractured within into literally, at times, hundreds of different countries. So it's tricky to show it, and it's normal for maps to simplify the situation. I myself have gone for a compromise where I show the borders of Bohemia and Bavaria, since they're large, semi-independent entities at this time, while keeping it all the same color. Austria is technically a part of it as well, but it's almost always shown distinctly on maps anyway. So I simply added the color of the Holy Roman Empire as an outline along Austria's borders to still indicate it as a part of the HRE. Next, we're adding 3 huge entities: Hungary, Poland, and Lithuania. They were much bigger than now, and this is actually before Poland and Lithuania were joined together. But now all 3 of these are shown more accurately and at their proper sizes. Next are the entities of Wallachia and Moldavia. What's interesting is that this is a very unusual time for these 2 countries. Normally, these 2 are vassals to the Ottoman Empire, but during the specified years of 1476 and 1477 in the show, Moldavia was actually a vassal of Poland at this time, which is why I gave it Poland's colors here. Wallachia, meanwhile, had temporarily shaken off Ottoman vassalage until, coincidentally, Vlad III's death, when Ottoman forces finally reinstalled one of their own supported rulers on the throne. Even though in this show, Vlad III, I guess, is not ruler of Wallachia, but Dracula, I'm still going to show it as separate, especially since the show didn't seem to show Ottomans in Wallachia. Speaking of which, let's color in the Ottoman Empire next. Then finally, add the Italian states of the time. Now we have all the country borders and colors down. To better fit the style of the map drawn in the show, I'll add some hand-drawn mountains, and in the correct spots with mountain ranges, as the original had mountains in places that very clearly didn't have mountains. This leaves us the cities and fortresses, as well as labels in a frame. Ta-da! This is what the region of Europe actually looked like in 1477-ish, other than vampire-controlled Styria. And there was also kind of a Hungarian invasion of Bohemia that would have normally happened, but without spoiling too much of the show, I'm going to assume that in the event of Dracula declaring war on humanity, that Hungary would have been a little bit preoccupied, so I find it unlikely it still would have happened. Regardless, all Netflix had to do was give me $10 and they could have avoided all of this, and have gotten a much more accurate map for the show. I guess if Netflix wants, they can try to post-edit the show and add this into the scenes where it's used if they want, but until that never happens, I'm going to have a full-res version of this map available on my Patreon, which is a wonderful place to support my channel if you want to see more content like this. Meanwhile, hope you enjoyed the video, hope you learned something. I'm Emperor Tigerstar, and I'll see you guys next time.